Answer me, Aneni, Aneni, Aneni. 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 Answer me, Aneni.
In the rising of the sun, we remember. In the blowing of the wind, we remember. In the opening of buds, we remember. We remember. When we're weary and need strength, we remember. When we're lost and sick at heart, we remember. When we've joys we yearn to share, we remember. We remember. So long as we live, they too shall live. They are now a part of us. They are now a part of us. As we remember, we remember. We remember.
to be a sanctuary, pure and holy, tried and true, and with thanksgiving I'll be a living sanctuary for you. Lord, prepare me to be a sanctuary, pure and holy, tried and true, and with thanksgiving I'll be a living sanctuary for you. Ve'asuli mikdash ve'shachanti betocham va'anachnu nevarech ya me'ata ve'ad olam. Oh Lord, prepare me to be a sanctuary, pure and holy, tried and true, and with thanksgiving I'll be a living sanctuary for you.
Adonai roi lo echsar binot deshe yarbitzeni al mei menuchot yenaleini nafshi yeshovev yancheni v'maglei tzedek yancheni v'maglei tzedek leman shemo gam ki elech begeit salmavet lo irara ki ata imadi shivtecha umishantecha hema yenachamuni taroch lefanai shulchan neged zorai dishanta vashemen roshi kosi reva כל ימי חיי, ושבתי בבית אדוני לאורך ימים. אדוני רואי לא אחסר, אדוני רואי לא
Ashkivenu Adonai Eloheinu leshalom Lehamidenu malkeinu Ashkivenu Adonai Eloheinu leshalom Lehamidenu malkeinu Spread the shelter of your peace over us.
Shabbat Shalom, Shabbat Shalom, Shabbat Shalom, Shabbat Shalom. Oh, freedom, oh, freedom, oh, freedom over me. And before I'd be a slave, I'd be buried in my grave and go home to my Lord and be free. Shabbat Shalom, Shabbat Shalom, Shabbat Shalom, Shabbat Shalom. Oh, freedom, oh, freedom, oh, freedom, oh, freedom over me. And before I'd be a slave, I'll be buried in my grave and come home to my Lord and be free. Oh, Shabbat Shalom.
Shabbat Shalom. Welcome to Friday night services at Central Synagogue. I am Rabbi Dan Ross, joined by my wonderful colleagues, Cantor Dan Mutlu, Rabbi Sarah Berman. Out there in the internet somewhere is Rabbi Hilly Haber. And we are so honored to be joined this evening as well by Reverend Otis Moss III of Trinity United Church of Christ in Chicago, as we honor the legacy of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. We are also so blessed, as always, to have our inimitable musicians who lift our voices in song as they just did for that welcoming prayer. As we all know so well, Dr. King understood the importance of cultivating a coalition of faith leaders in support of the American Civil Rights Movement, as he famously charged his fellow clergymen in his letter from Birmingham jail. We are caught in an inescapable network of mutuality, tied in a single garment of destiny. And it is in the spirit of interfaith solidarity that I direct our hearts this evening to our friends and neighbors at St. Peter's Church, whose sanctuary, they're right across the street, and their sanctuary was devastated last week by a flood. These past 2 years, I have been blessed to pray with Pastor Jared Stoller and his warm, loving community at our Interfaith Thanksgiving service, and every year we also mark Yom HaShoah with St. Peter's as well. We at Central Synagogue know all too well the pain of seeing our sacred space so critically damaged. And so, as you may have seen in an email that went out to our community earlier today, we are in conversations with Pastor Stoller and the church's other clergy to offer our support, including sharing our own experience rebuilding our beautiful sanctuary and offering up this space for worship. In addition, we will be making a gift to support the church's rebuilding efforts, and if you wish to add your own contribution, you may direct a gift towards the St. Peter's Church Fund on the Central Synagogue donation page. We will pool these gifts and send them as a community. There will also be a service of solidarity this coming Sunday at 11 a.m., which you can join via St. Peter's live stream, and Rabbi Ari Lorge will be participating. We pray that the St. Peter's community will know healing from this tragedy swiftly, completely, and soon. Dr. King wrote that darkness cannot drive out darkness. Only light can do that. Hate cannot drive out hate. Only love can do that. So we continue our service this evening by bringing a little more light and a little more love into the world with the lighting of the Shabbat candles, and we are joined by this Shabbat's bar mitzvah, Dylan Spitalnik, and his family.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher kidishanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu lehadlik ner shel Shabbat. We'll continue bringing that light into our sacred spaces by welcoming Shabbat with psalms. We'll start with Lachuna Ranana. You can find that on page 12, and then we'll go to Hariyu Ladonai Kol Haaretz on page 15. Lechol neranena Ladonai Nariya Letzor Yishenu Neranena Yai lai 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 Ladonai Yai lai 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 Maria Yai lai 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 Zu Yishenu Yai lai 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 lai. Let us sing out to God, the maker of all, sure and all of creation from mountain to sea. Hear our song. Let us listen with all of our hearts to hear God's voice. At that moment where we greet the Shabbat bride. We're going to sing L'Chadodi on page 20 or your order of service, and you can sing along with us on verses 1, 2, 5, and 9, rising on that last verse to greet the Shabbat bride. Ay, 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 L'Chadodi, ay, 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 likrat kala, ay, 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 penei Shabbat, ay, 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 נקבלה. היי 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 לך דודי, היי 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 לקראת כלה, היי 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 פני שבת, היי 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 נקבלה. שמעו וזכו בדיבור אחד, השמיענו אל המיוחד. אדוני אחד שמו אחד, שהוא תפארת ולתהילה. היי 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 לך דודי, היי 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 לקראת כלה, היי 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 פני שבת, היי 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 נקבלה. לקראת שבת לכו ונברכי בכל הברכה, מראש מקדם נסוכה, סוף מעשה במחשבה תחילה. היי 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 לך דודי, היי 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 לקראת כלה, היי 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 פני שבת, היי 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 נקבלה. התעוררי, התעוררי, כי בא אורך, קומי אורי, 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 שתדברי, כבוד אדוני עלייך דגלה. היי 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 לך דודי, היי 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 לקראת כלה, היי 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 פני שבת, היי 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 נקבלה. בואי בשלום עטרת מעלה, גם בשמחה ובצהלה, תוך אמוני את בסגולה. בואי חלה, היי 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 לך דודי, היי 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 לקראת כלה, היי 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 פני שבת, היי 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 נקבלה. היי 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 לך דודי, היי 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 לקראת כלה, היי 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 פני שבת, היי 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 remain standing now for our call to worship, Baruch Hu, on page 146. Ya la 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 la, ya la ya la 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 la, ya la 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 la, ya la ya la 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 la. Baruch Hu et Adonai HaMevorach.
Adonai HaMevorach le'olam va'ed.
Ya la 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 la, ya la ya la 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 la, ya la 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 la, ya la 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 la.
If you stood, we invite you to take a seat. Baruch atah Adonai, Eloheinu melech haolam, asher bidvaro ma'ariv aravim, בחוכמה פותח שערים, ובתבונה משנה עתים, ומחליף את הזמנים, ומסדר את הכוכבים, במשמרותיהם ברקיע כרצונו. בורא יום ולילה, גולל אור מפני חושך, וחושך מפני אור.
ומעביר יום ומביא לילה, ומבדיל בין יום ובין לילה. אדוני צבאות שמו, אל חי וקיים, תמיד ימלוך עלינו, לעולם ועד. ברוך אתה אדוני, המעריך
Love is the greatest force in the universe. It is the heartbeat of the moral cosmos. He who loves is a participant in the being of God. So wrote Martin Luther King Jr. Every day, our liturgy reminds us that God is the source of life, of light, and of love. Dr. King, too, taught of a God who is inseparable from love. What a radical act of faith to declare God's love to people to whom society has shown disregard, disrespect, and outright assault. This year, during and after the wave of anguished protests following the murders of George Floyd, Breonna Taylor, and others, those who live the legacy of Dr. King, the visionary faith leaders of today, including Reverend Otis Moss III, they continue to remind us that hate is incompatible with God. It is when we love that we are part of God's very being. It is when we love that we become living embodiments of Torah.
Baruch atah Adonai, Ohev Amo Yisrael. Shema Yisrael, Adonai Eloheinu, Adonai ואהבת את אדוני אלוהיך בכל לבבך ובכל נפשך ובכל מאודיך. והיו הדברים האלה אשר אנוכי מצווך היום על לבבך, ושיננתם לבניך ודיברת בם בשבתך בביתך ובלכתך בדרך ובשוכבך ובקומך, וקשרתם לאות על ידיך והיו לטוטפות בין עיניך, וכתבתם על מזוזות ביתך ובשעריך, למען תזכרו ועשיתם את מצוותיי והייתם קדושים לאלוהיכם. אני אדוני אלוהיכם אשר הוצאתי אתכם מארץ מצרים להיות לכם לאלוהים. אני אדוני אלוהיכם. Our Song of Freedom, Mi Chamocha, on page 152, we'll start with these words in English from the larger song of freedom that this song, Mi Chamocha, comes from. You are my strength, and you are my song. You have become my liberation. Liberation. Ya la 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 la, ya la 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 la, ya la 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 la, ya la 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 la, ya la 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 la, ya la 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 la, ya la 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 la, ya la 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 la. Bi chamocha la 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 la, ya la 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 la, ya la 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 la, ya la 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 la, ya la 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 la. You are my strength, and you are my song. You have become my liberation, liberation. You are my strength, and you are my song. You have become my liberation, liberation. Ya la 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 la, ya la 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 la, ya la 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 la, ya la 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 la, ya la 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 la, ya la 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 la, ya la 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 la, ya la 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 la, ya la 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 la, ya la 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 la, ya la 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 la, ya la 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 la, ya la 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 la
The precariousness of life and of peace has never been more clear. And yet, despite our very real fears, we lie down each night with the hope, with the faith that we will get up again tomorrow. As Dr. King said, we must walk on in the days ahead with an audacious faith in the future. So we pray that we might wake up tomorrow with the audacious faith it will take to open our eyes, face our fears, and arise to build a stronger foundation for life and peace together.
Hashkivenu Adonai Eloheinu leshalom, leshalom V'hamidenu malkeinu lechayim. Hashkivenu, Hashkivenu Adonai Eloheinu leshalom Hamidenu malkeinu lechayim. Spread the shelter of your peace over us. Guide us in wisdom, compassion, and trust. Hashkivenu Adonai Eloheinu leshalom Hamidenu save us for the sake of your name. Shield us from hatred, from sorrow and pain. Hashkiveinu, Hamidenu Malkeinu, We'll rise now for Amidah, our standing prayer, on page 155. Ya la 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 la, 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 ya la la la, ya la 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 la. Ya la 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 la, ya la 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 la. Adonai, open up my lips, that my mouth may declare your praise. Adonai, sefatai tiftach, ufi yagid tehilatecha. Ata Adonai, Eloheinu, Elohei Avotenu v'Imotenu, Elohei Abraham, Elohei Yitzhak, Elohei Yaakov, Elohei Sarah, Elohei Rivka, Elohei Rachel, Elohei Leah. El Hagadol, Hagibor v'Anora, El Elyon, Gomel Chasadim Tovim, Bekonei Hakol. וזוכר חסדי אבות ואימהות, ומביא גאולה לבני בניהם, למען שמו באהבה. מלך עוזר, מושיע ומגן, ברוך אתה אדוני, מגן אברהם, בעזרת שרה. אתה גיבור לעולם אדוני, מחיי מתים, אתה רב להושיע. משיב הרוח, מוריד הגשם, מכלכל חיים בחסד, בחיי מתים ברחמים רבים. סומך נופלים ורופא חולים, ומתיר אסורים, ומקיים אמונתו לשני עפר. מי כמוך בעל גבורות, ומדומה לך, מלך ממית ומחיה, ומצמיח ישועה, ונאמן אתה להחיות מתים. ברוך אתה אדוני, מחיי המתים. אתה קדוש ושמך קדוש, וקדושים בכל יום יהללוך הסלע. ברוך אתה אדוני, האל הקדוש. We now take a few moments for those prayers that are so personal and dear to us in silent prayer. When the glory comes, it will be ours. It will be ours. Whoa, one day, when the war is won, it will be sure. We will be sure. Oh, glory,
Glory, glory,
oh,
glory, glory.
We've got some difficult days ahead, but it really doesn't matter with me now because I've been to the mountaintop. I don't mind. Like anybody, I would like to live a long life. Longevity has its place, but I'm not concerned about that now. I just want to do God's will. And He's allowed me to go up to the mountain. And I've looked over and I've seen the promised land. I may not get there with you, but I want you to know tonight that we as a people will get to the promised land. So I'm happy tonight. I'm not worried about anything. I'm not fearing any man. Mine eyes have seen the glory of the coming of the Lord.
one day, when the glory comes, it will be ours. It will be ours. Whoa, one day, when the war is won, we will be sure. We will be sure. Oh, glory,
Glory, glory,
oh,
glory, glory.
now the war is not over. Victory isn't won, but we'll fight on to the finish. And when it is all done, we'll cry glory.
Glory,
Oh, glory.
glory,
Woo.
glory, glory,
We'll cry glory.
glory,
Oh, glory.
glory,
Woo.
glory, glory.
When the war is won,
Glory,
when it's all said and done,
glory,
we'll cry glory.
glory,
Oh, glory.
glory.
Many of us enter this Shabbat facing physical illness or injury, mental health struggles, moral injury, or spiritual struggles. As a nation, we acknowledge the deep wounds of racism, sexism, xenophobia, anti-Semitism, and all of the sinat chinam, the baseless hatred that divides us. We join together each week in our Mishaberach Lecholim, our prayer for healing, because whether as individuals, as a community, or as a nation, we are in need of guidance, strength, and comfort. As Dr. King reminds us, we must accept finite disappointment, but never lose infinite hope. It is with infinite hope that I invite you to speak aloud the names of those you love in need of these prayers. As a community, we think of Barbara Aiden, Marty Ballett, Rivka Bracha Bat Avraham, Kathy Barron, Sandy Basson, Eileen Berger, Donald Brief, Jerry Calderon, Lou Chen, Frank Doyle Jr., Daniel Elstein, Marcia Firestone, Corey Flaum, Jerry Friedman, Susan Gannis, Mariela Gomez, Ashley Goodman, Lila Grobman, Alan Helene, Howard Hochberg, Roy James, Marjorie Lentz, Michael Madden, Elaine and Wally Nathan, Jody Pliskin, Brigida Perez Prado, Carol Roman, Barbara Reish, Leslie Rosenberg, Sandy Schupper, Herbert Strauss, Laura Strauss, Ann Stochiner, Sarah Stochiner, Ronald Tabak, Clara Turkenix, Jane Vigon, and Pam Young. May they all, and may we all, be strengthened and comforted by this prayer.
מי שברך אבותינו אברהם יצחק ויעקב שרה רבקה רחל ולאה הוא יברך וירפא את החולים מי שברך אבותינו אברהם יצחק ויעקב שרה רבקה רחל ולאה הוא יברך וירפא את החולים.
Infinite hope is much easier to cultivate when we can see the joy of new life, of long life, of connection, and of accomplishment. This is why we at Central pair our prayers for healing with our prayers of thanksgiving. I invite you to rise in body or spirit and stay standing if I mention a simcha, a joy that applies to you. This means that in just a moment, we will all be standing together, at least in our hearts, buoyed by our shared infinite hope. If you or someone you love will become B'nai Mitzvah this weekend, Dylan, that's you and your family, please rise. If you recently welcomed someone new into your family, a fiance or spouse or baby or even a pet, I invite you to rise if you are able. If you celebrated or are about to celebrate a birthday or an anniversary, please rise. If you got your first or even your second dose of the coronavirus vaccine, or even if you just made an appointment to get a dose of the vaccine, please rise, and we applaud you. If you join me in celebrating the normalized relations between Sudan and Israel in the continuing work of the Abraham Accords, please rise. If, despite the distance yet to go to achieve true justice and equality in our country, you still find inspiration in the words and in the example of Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., please rise. If the music of this service is lifting your heart and your spirit, please rise. And while I can't imagine that anybody is still sitting in their hearts or in their apartments, if you find strength and comfort and joy in the simple and the stunning fact that we are here together, once again celebrating Shabbat, please join us all in rising as we sing Shehechianu.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam שהחיינו וקיימנו והגיענו לזמן הזה. ברוך אתה אדוני אלוהינו מלך העולם שהחיינו וקיימנו והגיענו לזמן הזה.
After 400 years of slavery in Egypt, our Torah tells us, God took note of the Israelites' suffering and stepped into human history to liberate an oppressed and downtrodden people. As political theorist Michael Walzer reminds us, the story of the Exodus from Egypt ignited a revolution in human thought and imagination. No longer was it true that if a person was born into slavery, she would have to remain a slave. Everyone who heard the story of the Exodus knew that pharaohs could be overcome, that the shackles of injustice and oppression could be thrown off. Another future was possible. Tonight, we are honored to welcome Reverend Dr. Otis Moss III, a preacher and scholar whose ministry embodies the legacy and spirit of the Exodus story. Reverend Moss stands in the line of American heroes and prophets, men and women who brought about liberation and freedom for generations of Americans through preaching and living out the word of the God of the Exodus. Prophets like Dr. Benjamin Elijah Mays, Howard Thurman, Ella Baker, the Reverend Martin Luther King Jr., Otis Moss Jr., and countless others whose prayer and protest, scholarship and art transformed America and continues to inspire new visions for our country and the world. With the legacy of the civil rights movement in his bones, Reverend Moss preaches and practices love and justice from his pulpit at Trinity United Church of Christ in Chicago. A graduate of Morehouse College, Yale Divinity School, and Chicago Theological Seminary, Reverend Moss is a nationally recognized and celebrated religious leader and teacher. The recipient of the 2016 NAACP Image Award, Reverend Moss is the author of several books, including Blue Note Preaching in a Post-Soul World, Finding Hope in an Age of Despair, published in 2015. His poetry, articles, and sermons have been published on the HuffPost, The Root, and Sojourners magazine. To learn more about Reverend Moss and his work, please join us tomorrow at 4 p.m. for a conversation on the legacy of the civil rights movement and liberation theology, concluding with Havdalah. Visit Central's virtual website to learn more and register. Reverend Moss, on behalf of Central's clergy, staff, and community, it is my honor and great joy to welcome you to Shabbat services and to extend our deepest gratitude to you for joining us this weekend.
I thank you. I thank the entire Central Synagogue family for this invitation, for this absolutely stunning and beautiful worship. I want to thank all of those who serve and all those who are worshiping. It is an honor to have this opportunity. And to your senior rabbi, my friend, my sister, Reverend Angela Buchtel, she emailed me the other day, and I was telling her that I am honeymoon happy and also peacock proud to have this opportunity to be with the Central family. I have to say at this moment, this worship was absolutely stunning and magnificent. The work of your musicians, the cantors, just amazing. And I just thank you for blessing us with such extraordinary music on this day. I have to give a shout out. I was loving, you got one of the smoothest drummers ever in the history of drumming. With his mask, he was just as cool could be. and to my newfound friend, Reverend Hilly. We thank you for your witness and for your work. And I look forward to what you will be doing in the future, that God is yet to unwrap all of the gifts that are in you as you continue to serve our community across this nation. I would like at this moment, as we begin, as we talk about the legacy of America's greatest prophet, none other than Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., an embodiment of that prophet Amos. And I'm so thankful that Central is honoring this legacy of Dr. King. It is interesting that Vincent Harding, one of Dr. King's colleagues and also editor of many of his works, writes in a book he wrote on Dr. King entitled Martin Luther King Jr., An Inconvenient Hero. He says that, borrowing from poet Carl Wendell, he says that many people love Dr. King now that he is dead. The poet says it this way: now that he is safely dead, let us build monuments to his name. It is easy to honor dead men because they make such convenient heroes. But you, Central, are honoring the complexity, the fullness, and the radical nature of this man who sought to not make America great again, but to make America a space where those who've been marginalized and who are invisible could have space in this democratic project with all of its challenges. And so we thank you for you as you honor and we continue to work together. I would like to begin because one of the things I do every year at Trinity United Church of Christ, I take one of Dr. King's messages, just a title, maybe a scripture, and I lift that up and do almost a remix of the message that he lifted up years ago. And I would like to do the same today. There is a message that Dr. King preached several times, but one time, one of the last times that he preached that message was in 1966. He preached it in Cincinnati at the Mount Zion Baptist Church, where my father was pastor. And it was a message entitled A Knock at Midnight. I want to take that inspiration of Dr. King and the scripture that he lifted up, speaking about a man who comes knocking at midnight, looking for bread because of the pain of his existential experience and what was happening in the world. And the person who answered the door says, "It's late. My wife is asleep. My children have to go to school in the morning. We cannot help you." He crafted a message to speak about America. And then I want to do the same, but not a knock at midnight. I simply want to raise this idea and this question: a knock during America's midnight. A knock during America's midnight. I say to you, my friends, it is midnight. It is midnight in America. The light of our mythic dawn has been replaced by the darkening skies of America's refusal to face her history and pull back the veil of social dysfunction lurking underneath our democracy. It is midnight. Something is wrong in our nation. On paper, our nation is an amalgamation of wealth, creativity, power, alleged possibility, but this country built on stolen sacred soil of indigenous people is being haunted, as we have been witnessing, by chickens coming home to roost. It is midnight. Midnight has come to America in the form of Confederate ghosts, masquerading as political pundits who shout peculiar lies wrapped in the cloth of conservative mantras like, "Make America great again." I must stop here parenthetically and raise the question, when people make that statement, what year were you talking about? Was it 1954 before Brown versus Board of Education? Was it a time period when women could not vote? Was it during the Trail of Tears? When was the moment that you're talking about? It does not make America great again, but shall we make America? One half of this nation is enthralled by this phrase, and the other half shudders in horror at the mere mention of this statement for fear that these men and women are chanting wicked incantations to return America to a romanticized antebellum moment. It is midnight. How can our nation be so divided in this midnight moment of our democracy? Midnight has come to America, and we have even witnessed as the Capitol was stormed, as something has changed, that the ground has shifted underneath us, and we are all bewildered in this midnight moment. It is midnight. But it did not just start recently, it did not start in the last 4 years. This has been in the making. It is midnight when children are caged and mothers weep, just as Rachel wept in Israel. So does Isabella from Guatemala as she cries for Jose and Selena. This country, this nation of scientific advances, military might, and economic prosperity, is also the same nation of healthcare misery, opioid addiction, mass incarceration, environmental denial, toxic masculinity, and political corruption. The same nation that prides itself on economic prosperity is the same nation where it's easier to purchase a gun on the south side of Chicago than to receive a scholarship. We have greater protections for inanimate objects than children and youth seeking educational opportunity. I say to you, it must be midnight in our nation. Dr. King stated, midnight is the hour when men desperately seek to obey the 11th commandment, thou shalt not get caught. According to midnight, the cardinal sin is to be caught, and the cardinal virtue is to get by. And the text that Dr. King lifted up is simply one that is usually framed in and around prayer, but he decided to mine the particular text to remind America that there are people that are knocking on the door of our democracy, and we cannot close the door. That they are looking for the bread, they are hungry for the bread of love. And I would say that we are dealing with several forms of midnight. We are dealing with a moral midnight, where people have lost their moral compass. They are doing things for political gain instead of looking how we lay out a future for those who are yet to be born. That those who have been placed in positions of trust politically will not even admit the truth because they are afraid of their constituency. We are dealing with a moral midnight. It is, in the words of Reinhold Niebuhr, that we are dealing with predatory self-interest. And we must regain our moral compass. A moral midnight is what we are dealing with. But not only just a moral midnight, there is a historical midnight, for we have lost our historical memory. I'm reminded of one of the great stories of history that many people do not know. It's a gentleman by the name of Robert Smalls, who was born an enslaved African in South Carolina. But Robert Smalls, recognizing the Spirit of God within him, he said, "My child shall not grow up a slave." Just as we sang in service today, "Before I be a slave, I will be buried in my grave." It was Robert Smalls, along with his wife and 11 other enslaved Africans, decided to hatch a plan, because in South Carolina during the Civil War, they would allow Africans aboard the Civil War ships, and they would do everything on the ship. They would clean it, and they would care for it. They would even steer the ship around the bay and even into the wider sea. But the one thing they could not do, they could not be captain of a ship. It's the peculiarity of racism. And so they had to do everything while the Confederate officers just sat there and watched. And it was Robert Smalls who hatched a plan that was even better than Ocean's 11, 12, or anything you've ever seen. He decided that they were going to liberate this Confederate warship. And after the officers, Confederate, who were on the ship had some spirits and got tired for the night and decided to go to a brothel, it was Robert Smalls who brought his family, and the 11 other Africans boarded the ship, and they decided that they would take this ship and they would leave and sail to freedom. They donned on the outfits of the Confederacy, and one stood at the bow of the ship, and they sailed out because they had been watching so closely. They knew all of the Confederate codes. So as the ship sailed out of the bay, and there was the harbor master looking at the ship, it was Robert Smalls dressed as a Confederate soldier who gave the proper signals, and the harbor master saluted, and they made their way out of the bay. But it did not stop there, because in order for them to make their way to freedom, there was a blockade from the Union, and they were ordered to fire on any Confederate ship. And as they sailed, they saw a Union ship. That Union ship, known as the Onward, looked and saw the ship that Robert Smalls and his family was on. They trained their guns upon Robert Smalls. They did not know what to do. Robert Smalls could not figure out, what should we do in this moment? We are about to be destroyed, when it was Sister Smalls who says, "Find me a white sheet and run it up the pole." But as they ran the white sheet up the pole, as if it had been scripted in Hollywood, all of a sudden a fog came in and covered the flag that was saying, "We surrender." They trained their guns upon Robert Smalls and his family, and they said 1, 2, and before they said 3, the sun came out and burned off all of the fog. They could see the white flag. They said, "Hold on." And they did not fire and boarded the ship. And when they boarded the ship, something strange happened. They got on the ship. They were looking for somebody white. They could not believe that Africans could navigate such a complex instrument known as a Confederate warship. When they couldn't find anybody, they asked, they said, "Where is the white person who is actually controlling the ship?" And Robert Smalls says, "It is I. We are the ones who have liberated the ship. We give it to Abraham Lincoln for the Union Army." And they lifted up Robert Jr. They lifted him up to God and said, "You shall not live your life as a slave." But it does not stop there. Robert Smalls eventually became captain in the Union Army, the first African American, and then decided after the war to move back to South Carolina and bought the land and the house where he was a slave and allowed the mistress to live on the property, not in the big house, but in a little house in the back. But it does not stop there. He then started 4 schools for those who had been enslaved Africans, and then decided to run for Congress and won. When I think about Robert Smalls and all that he was able to do in the midnight of the most divided moment in American history, if Robert Smalls could see the light in the middle of midnight, why cannot we draw on the history and the hope in our history? It is moral midnight, and it is also a historical midnight, but it is also a midnight in the faith community. It seems as if the evangelicals have taken the mic, and no longer of those who believe in the full humanity of other human beings no longer are able to speak with power in this democracy. We no longer can be silent, those people of faith, that we must be able to speak with authority about the power and love and justice that flows from the God we serve. Love and justice, not love or justice. Love without justice is simply sentimentality. Justice without love becomes legalism. But when love and justice get married, they walk down the aisle, and then they produce children, one by the name of liberation and the other by the name of transformation, that we must merge love and justice together if we are to deal with this midnight. And when we look at the news, when we see all that is going on in our nation, it seems as if it's dark in this country, that there are people who are knocking on the door for possibility and help and for the bread of love. those who have been marginalized, those who've been pushed to the side, those who do not have a voice. It is midnight for them, but it is midnight in our democracy. It is midnight. And the one thing that we can do to transform midnight is recognize that love is the way to transform midnight. If I may give this to you, because I know that the hour is late. I said that it is midnight. Midnight is a difficult time, but I also must give you some really good news also. The bad news is it's midnight. The good news is it's midnight. If I was a Trinity, I would say, tell your neighbor to say amen. The bad news is it's midnight, or Rabbi Hilly. The good news is it's midnight. Let me say it again. It's bad news is it's midnight. Good news is it's midnight. Here it is. You see, one must understand that when you are experiencing midnight, you see, after 11:59, though it is dark, you move into midnight, which is a new day. In other words, it's dark. That's the bad news. But the good news is that it is also a new day. It is morning time. Even though it's dark, there are still possibilities to bring us into the morning. But if we do not face our midnight, we will end up mourning instead of seeing a new morning. And so in the words of Dr. King, though it is midnight, we can see transformation in this country. As Dr. King said, we shall overcome because Carlyle is right, that no lie can live forever. We shall overcome because William Cullen Bryant is right. Truth crushed to the earth will rise again. We shall overcome because James Russell Lowell is right. Truth forever on the scaffold, wrong forever on the throne, yet the scaffold sways the future. We shall overcome because the word is right. You shall reap what you sow. With this faith, we will be able to hew out a mountain of despair, a stone of hope. With this faith that we have in this democracy, we shall be able to transform the jangling discords of our nation into a beautiful symphony of humanity. With this faith, we will be able to speed up the day when all of God's children over in this nation, black and white, Muslim and Methodist, Asian and atheist, Latino and Lutheran, Presbyterian and Pentecostal, Protestant and Catholic, Jew and Gentile, queer and Quaker, agnostic and Anglican, Baptist and Buddhist, Hindu and holiness, ghetto and country, redneck and reformed, urban and suburban will be able to join hands and sing in the words of that great poet from South Central LA by the name of Kendrick Lamar, we gonna be all right. But if I may borrow from our ancestors and simply say it this way, they would say it this way, that there will come a time when we will all be able to say in this democracy, free at last, free at last. Thank God Almighty, we are free at last. Though it is midnight, it is the possibility of morning. If we face our midnight, then a new morning may come. And in the words of that song, we will be able to see the glory. Oh, the glory. When the morning comes, we'll be able to see the glory. God bless you.
Wow. Thank you so much, Reverend Moss, for that inspiring message. Thank you for gracing us and our community with such words, such powerful words of urgency, but also hope. So we go now to the concluding part of our service, Aleinu L'Shabeach. You can find those words on page 282, and we'll ask you to rise if you're able at home.
עלינו לשבח לאדון הכל, לתת גדולה ליוצר בראשית, שלא עשנו כגויי הארצות, ולא שמנו כמשפחות האדמה, שלא שם חלקנו כהם, וגורלנו ככל המונם. ואנחנו קוראים ומשתחווים מודים לפני מלך מלכי המלכים הקדוש ברוך הוא. ונאמר והיה אדוני למלך על כל הארץ ביום ההוא יהיה אדוני אחד ושמו ויתקדש שמי רבה.
Our thoughts now turn to those dear ones who are no longer with us in body, but who are eternally with us in spirit. This week, just over a year after the coronavirus was first detected in China, we crossed another terrible milestone in this pandemic, as the death toll related to COVID-19 has now surpassed 2 million souls worldwide. We join the global community in praying for those who have passed and for their loved ones, and ask that their memories ever be for a blessing. The Central Synagogue community is mourning the passing in recent days of Bonnie Bourbon, mother of Alyssa Goldstein, Jerome Bernheim, father of Doug, Claudia, and Tricia, Phyllis Elstein, mother of Tracy and Adam, Gloria Diamond, wife of Erwin, sister of Zane, mother of Lynn, Michelle, and Sue-Ann, Alan Richard Epstein, father of Elizabeth Caden and Peggy Tanner, Howard Gans, husband of Nancy, father of Beth, David, Kate, and Amy, Carol Gordon, mother of Mitchell, Marla, and Shelley, Vera Hera, sister of Barry Erdos, Lisa Hockman, mother of Jason, Nicole, and Jared, David Kane, husband of Marilyn, father of Stephanie, Claudia, Josh, Julie, and Joe, Helen Levy, wife of Carl, mother of Lisa and Colette, Helga Loeb, mother of Diane, Roger, and Janet, Susan Karamadin, wife of Michael, mother of John, Henry Marks, father of Alan and Stephen, Gerald Paul Pont, partner of Dina Cohen, brother of Marlene Barron, father of Meredith Polanski, Betty Roswell, and Cheryl Tuttle, wife of Henry, mother of Russ, Matthew, David, and Kate. Central Synagogue, we name as our own those members of the American Armed Forces who perished in the past week. This week we are sad to report the loss of Army Staff Sergeant Anthony Bermudez. We also mourn those who perished in mass shootings in America, Yaron Fan, Aisha Johnson, and Anthony Faulkner. Now we turn to those who death has taken from us at this time in years past. We are observing the yahrzeits this evening of Gene Ackman, Harry Egres, Arnold Aronson, Riva Beers Milstein, Maurice Benzaken, Richard Bernstein, Lila Bett, Eva Biederman, Naomi Binstock, Patsy Brandt, Barbara Brooks, Jerome Bueller, Harold Berg, Ann Carver, Larissa Chernyshova, Harry Cohen, Myra Cohn, Dion Cole, Maurice Kosman, Lottie Cuba, Murray Cuba, Wanda Dembeck, Henry Eigen, Bonnie Bevan Emery, Rosalind Epstein, Florence Eschen, Miriam Fish, Sidney Frey, Alfred Friedman, Miles Friedman, Marilyn Friedman, Terry Geronimus, Marilyn Gilman, Lawrence Glickman, Albert Gratis, Margaret Harbour, Stephen Hayes, Bruce Heller, Irving Halpern, John F. Hull, Solomon Katz, Arthur Kaufman, Charlotte Kimmel, Leo Langer, Joseph H. Lauder, Ann Leftoff, Joseph Leftoff, Arnold Lentz, Florence Leviton, Lenore Levine, Abraham Lipton, Renee Locker, Eskandar Manocherian, Miriam Menon, Charles Miller, Wayne Myers, Todd David Pilch, David Pliskin, Gertrude Rabin, Seymour Rakowski, Simon Rappaport, Jules Reish, Molly Reich, Suzanne Riker, Herbert Robbins, Albert Rosenberg, Beatrice Rothman, Claire Rubin, Sophie Ruskin, Edward Ruskin, Louis Saunders, Samuela Schupper Sussman, Ralph Siegelman, Ann Siegel, Harry Silverstein, Betty Serkin, Catherine Smink, Norma Smith, Frida Sokol, Harold Solomon, Erica Spitzer, Miles Stuchin, Sylvia Swerdlick, Elliot Tall, Jane Trainin, Neil Underberg, Marcia Wasserman, Murray Westreich, Diane Wolfe, Jack Zakin, Max Zwieben, and Clara Swirling. At this time, if you are in the period of Shiva, the first 7 days following the passing of someone dear to you, we invite you to rise and share their name. If you are in the period of Shloshim, we invite you to rise. If you are in the period of Shana, we invite you to rise. If you are observing a yard site this evening, we invite you to rise. Zichronam livracha, may their memories ever be for a blessing. We join together in the words of Mourner's Kaddish on page 294. Yitgadal v'yitgadash shemei rabbah, be'alma divrach birutei v'yamlich malchutei, b'chayechon v'yomechon uv'chayei d'chol beit Yisrael, ba'agala uv'izman kariv v'imru amen. Yehei shmei rabbah mevarach le'olam l'amei amaya. Yitbarach v'yishabach v'yitpa'ar v'yitramam v'yitnaseh, v'yitadar v'yitaleh v'yitalal shebeit kudashah brichu. Le'ela min kol birchata v'shirata, tushbechata v'nechemata, damiran be'alma v'imru amen. Yehei shlama rabba min shamaya, v'chayim aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael v'imru amen. Oseh shalom b'mramav, huya aseh shalom, aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael v'imru amen.
Say shalom b'mromav, uyaseh shalom aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael, ve'al kol Yisrael,
My name is Chloe Trentalancha, and I am a student in this year's confirmation class at Central Synagogue. We are happy so many of you are joining us virtually, and I hope you will join us for future Shabbat services. As always, you can join us through our live stream, Facebook Live, YouTube channel, and JBS. To learn more about upcoming programming, please visit our website. Information about Shabbat morning worship can be found on our website as well. Mazel tov to our bar mitzvah and his family, Dylan Spidolnik. It is such a joy to see you taking your place in our community at Central, and we look forward to the time when you'll be in my place, making the announcements as a confirmation student. Congratulations again. Please join us in the Kiddush, which can be found on page 5 of our prayer books.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, borei peri hagafen. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, asher kidishanu b'mitzvotav v'ratzavanu, v'shabbat kodsho be'ahava u'ratzon hinchilanu, zikaron lema'aseh bereishit, כי הוא יום תחילה למקראי קודש, זכר ליציאת מצרים. כי בנו בחרת ואותנו קידשת מכל העמים, בשבת קודשך באהבה וברצון הנחלתנו. ברוך אתה אדוני מקדש השבת. While the rabbis weren't looking, I stole the challah, so it is now mine.
You have a family to feed, Kander
That's
Mutlu.
right. This is going to make incredible breakfast
And
tomorrow.
all they're going to eat for a week is challah.
Exactly. Join me in the blessing. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, hamotzi lechem min haaretz. Amen. Well, we are going to conclude with a song of hope. Though it is midnight, we shall overcome. You can find the words in your order of service. We shall overcome. We shall overcome. We shall overcome someday. Deep in my heart, I still believe we shall overcome someday. We shall live in peace. We shall live in peace. We shall live in peace someday. Deep in my heart, I do believe we shall live in peace someday. Shabbat Shalom.
Shabbat shalom.
Shabbat shalom.